Marcus Chun wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the construction site of New Eden Colony. 3 years since first settlement, and they were finally making real progress. The prefab structures were giving way to permanent buildings, and the agricultural domes were producing enough food to support their growing population of 800 souls. "Dad, can I go play by the river?" 8-year-old Tommy bounded up to him, his sandy hair catching the alien sun's orange light. Marcus glanced toward the tree line where the Keth'var River wound through the forest. The area had been cleared and declared safe by the security teams, but something in his gut always worried when Tommy ventured too far from the settlement. "Take Rascal with you?" Marcus said, nodding toward the honey badger that had somehow become Tommy's constant companion. The animal had wandered into their camp 6 months ago, just a juvenile then, probably orphaned. Dr. Rodriguez, their xenobiologist, had been fascinated. Kepler-7's ecosystem had somehow produced a creature nearly identical to Earth's honey badger, down to the fearless temperament and distinctive coloring. "Rascal doesn't count as supervision, Marcus," called out Sarah Mitchell, the colony's security chief, approaching with her usual stern expression. "The kid needs a human escort." "Rascal's better protection than half your security team," Marcus replied with a grin. It wasn't entirely a joke. The honey badger had already driven off several of the local predators that had wandered too close to the settlement. Tommy was already running toward the trees, the honey badger loping alongside him with that distinctive rolling gait. Rascal had grown considerably in the past months, now weighing close to 30 pounds of pure muscle and attitude. "I don't like it," Sarah muttered, adjusting her plasma rifle. "Command's been picking up strange energy signatures from the outer rim. Could be pirates, could be worse." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. How much worse? The kind that makes the Galactic Council issue warnings about traveling in unprotected space. Sarah's expression was grim. The kind that's been hitting isolated colonies and leaving no survivors. Before Marcus could respond, his comm unit crackled to life. "All stations, this is Command. We have multiple contacts approaching from the northwest quadrant. Classification unknown. All civilians to emergency shelters immediately." The afternoon air suddenly felt electric with tension. In the distance, Marcus could see Tommy playing by the river, completely unaware that their peaceful world was about to change forever. The ships came down like falling meteors, their hulls black as the void between stars. 6 vessels, sleek and predatory, settling into a defensive formation around the colony perimeter. Marcus had barely made it to the command bunker when the first transmission came through. "Primitive settlement." The voice was like grinding metal, translated through their universal communicator. "You will surrender your young for processing. Resistance is futile. You have 10 of your time units to comply." Commander Jackson, their military liaison, went pale. "Slavers, specifically the Keth'var Consortium." "Never heard of them," Sarah said, checking her weapons. "Child stealers," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, his face ashen. They're not even supposed to exist anymore. The Galactic Council banned their kind of operation centuries ago." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Tommy's still by the river." "We'll get him," Sarah said. But before she could move, the scanners lit up with movement. Ground forces were deploying from the alien ships, tall, insectoid creatures with too many joints and eyes like black diamonds. 6 armed bioforms, Jackson reported. Energy weapons. They're moving fast toward the settlement center and... Shit. His face went white. They've got heat signatures locked on civilians outside the perimeter. Marcus was already moving, grabbing a rifle from the weapons rack. "That's my son out there." "Marcus, wait," Sarah started, but he was already out the door. By the river, Tommy looked up from the dam he'd been building with river stones. Strange lights were moving through the trees, and Rascal was making a sound he'd never heard before. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from deep in the earth itself. "Rascal? What's wrong, boy?" The honey badger's fur was standing on end, making him look twice his normal size. His small eyes were fixed on something moving through the undergrowth on the far side of the river. Then Tommy saw them. Tall creatures that moved like spiders, their 6 arms ending in claws and weapons. Their eyes reflected the dying sunlight like mirrors, and when they spoke, it sounded like breaking glass. Human larva located. One of them chittered. Prime specimen. Commence extraction. Tommy didn't understand the words, but he understood the intent. He started to run, but the creatures were already moving, crossing the river with impossible speed and grace. That's when Rascal attacked. The honey badger didn't hesitate, didn't calculate odds, didn't consider that he weighed 30 pounds against creatures 3 times his size. He simply launched himself at the nearest Keth'var with a roar that seemed to shake the very trees. His claws found the creature's primary visual organ, and his teeth clamped down on what might have been a throat. The alien screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and began thrashing, trying to dislodge the furry terror that had latched onto its face. "Run, Tommy!" The voice came from the trees. Marcus burst from the underbrush, rifle blazing, plasma bolts lighting up the forest. "Get to the bunker!" But Tommy couldn't move. He watched in amazement as Rascal, hanging from the first alien's head, somehow managed to redirect its energy weapon to fire into its companion. The second Keth'var collapsed, its chitinous armor smoking. The honey badger released his grip and hit the ground running, immediately launching himself at a third attacker. This time, he went for the joints, those crucial connection points that Dr. Rodriguez had theorized about. His teeth found something vital, and the creature's leg folded at an impossible angle. Impossible, one of the surviving Keth'var transmitted. Small mammal showing combat effectiveness rating of apex predator. Reassessment required. Marcus reached Tommy and swept him up, still firing at the aliens. "What's your reassessment of this?" he shouted, putting a plasma bolt through one creature's central mass. Rascal had moved on to the fourth alien, somehow avoiding its 6 flailing arms to attack from below. There was something terrifying and magnificent about watching the honey badger work. He fought like physics didn't apply to him, like fear was a concept he'd never learned. The last 2 Keth'var began to retreat, carrying their wounded companion. As they disappeared into the forest, Marcus could hear their transmissions. Extraction team compromised. Request immediate reinforcement. Warning. Human settlement defended by unknown apex predator species. Marcus looked down at Rascal, who was calmly grooming himself as if he hadn't just fought off an alien raiding party. "Good boy," he whispered. Tommy hugged his father tight, then scrambled down to pet Rascal. "Did you see that, Dad? Rascal saved me." Marcus nodded, but his mind was racing. If these creatures were part of something larger, if they came back with reinforcements. He looked at the honey badger, who was now sniffing around the alien weapons with obvious interest. "Yeah, son. I saw." The attack on the Keth'var extraction team sent ripples throughout the galactic underworld. Within hours, the footage had been uploaded to the Consortium's tactical database and distributed to their field commanders across 3 sectors. High Commander ZXTH watched the recording for the 7th time, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. The grainy footage showed the impossible. A creature no larger than a Keth'var limb systematically dismantling a professional extraction team. "Analysis complete," her tactical officer reported. "The creature demonstrates combat algorithms exceeding most military bioforms. Reaction time, damage resistance, and tactical awareness all rate in the 95th percentile. Species classification? Unknown. No match in any database. The humans call it honey badger." ZXTH clicked her mandibles in annoyance. The Keth'var Consortium had built their reputation on precision raids against soft targets. Isolated colonies, research stations, anywhere they could acquire young sentients for their various markets. They had been operating beyond Galactic Council jurisdiction for decades, always careful to avoid direct confrontation with military forces. But this was different. This was a single animal making them look incompetent. "Prepare the full assault fleet," she commanded. 40 ships, ground forces, orbital bombardment capability. "We will make an example of this colony." "High Commander," the tactical officer hesitated. "Perhaps a surgical strike would be more appropriate? The humans are not council members, but attacking civilian populations. Zixtich's eyes fixed on her subordinate with predatory focus. Are you questioning my orders? No, High Commander. Preparing assault fleet now. Back on Kepler-7, the colonists were having their own strategic discussions. We can't fight a full fleet, Commander Jackson said, studying the long-range sensor data. 40 ships means at least 2,000 ground troops, plus orbital bombardment capability. Our defenses weren't designed for this scale of conflict. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from his tablet. I've been analyzing the biological samples from the attack. The Keth'var physiology is fascinating. Their exoskeleton is incredibly strong, but they have vulnerable joints, and their sensory organs are extremely sensitive to certain frequencies. That's great, Doc, but we've got one honey badger against an army, Sarah pointed out. Marcus had been quiet throughout the meeting, watching Tommy play with Rascal in the corner of the command bunker. The honey badger seemed completely unbothered by the approaching threat, more interested in a piece of alien technology Tommy had found. What if we don't need an army? Marcus said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. Rascal didn't just fight them off, Marcus continued. He terrified them. Did you hear their transmissions? They're not sending reinforcements because they're angry. They're sending them because they're scared. Scared of what? Jackson asked. Marcus pointed to Rascal, who was now methodically destroying the alien device by treating it like a chew toy. Of him. Of what he represents. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened with understanding. The honey badger syndrome. The what now? Sarah asked. It's a theoretical concept in xenobiology, Rodriguez explained excitedly. Most species develop natural limitations, fear responses that prevent them from taking on threats significantly larger than themselves. It's evolutionary smart, keeps them alive long enough to reproduce. But not honey badgers, Marcus added. They never developed that limitation. They're willing to fight anything, anywhere, anytime. So, Jackson was getting impatient. So imagine you're a species that spent millennia carefully choosing soft targets, Rodriguez continued. Suddenly you encounter something that doesn't play by those rules. Something that will attack you no matter how big you are, no matter how many weapons you have, no matter what the odds are. Tommy looked up from where he was playing. Rascal doesn't know how to give up. Marcus nodded. Exactly. And maybe that's exactly what we need to show them. The long-range sensors chimed with an alert. 40 ships had just entered the system, and they were accelerating toward Kepler-7. Whatever we're going to do, Jackson said grimly, we need to do it fast. Rascal looked up from the destroyed alien device and fixed his small, dark eyes on the command display showing the approaching fleet. For just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw the honey badger's lips pull back in what looked almost like a smile. I think, Marcus said slowly, it's time to introduce the galaxy to Earth's most unreasonable creature. The Keth'var fleet arrived like a storm front, 40 vessels blotting out the stars above New Eden Colony. High Commander Zixth had positioned her flagship in optimal bombardment range, ready to demonstrate the consequences of resistance to consortium operations. Begin preliminary bombardment, she ordered. Target the outlying structures first. Drive them toward the center. The first energy beams lanced down from orbit, turning the colony's outer perimeter into slag and smoke. But something was wrong with the human response. Instead of panicking, instead of surrendering, they were laughing. High Commander, the communications officer reported. We're receiving a transmission from the surface. Put it through. Marcus Chen's voice filled the bridge, calm and conversational. Commander Zixth, I presume? This is Marcus Chen, New Eden Colony Administrator. I have a proposition for you. Zixth clicked her mandibles in amusement. Humans do not negotiate with the consortium. You will surrender your young, or we will take them from your corpses. Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of single combat. The bridge fell silent. Even by human standards, this was insane. Single combat? Zixth repeated. Your best warrior against our defender. Winner takes all. If we win, you leave this system and never return. If you win, we'll surrender the children voluntarily. ZXTH's tactical officer leaned forward. High Commander, this could be a trap. But the High Commander was intrigued. Single combat was an ancient tradition among many species, including the Keth'var. And the humans couldn't possibly believe they had a warrior capable of matching a consortium battlecast. Very well, she transmitted. I accept. I will send down my personal champion, Keth'var the Bonerender, undefeated in 300 combats across 50 worlds. Who will be your champion? There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice came back, and ZXTH could swear she heard suppressed laughter. His name is Rascal. An hour later, the combatants faced each other in an improvised arena at the colony's center. Keth'var stood nearly 8 feet tall, his exoskeleton enhanced with combat implants, energy weapons integrated into 4 of his 6 arms. He had personally killed more than 1,000 sentients in his career. Across from him, Rascal sat on his haunches, looking for all the world like he was waiting for someone to throw him a treat. Tommy knelt beside his friend, whispering encouragement. You can do it, Rascal. Just like by the river. Okay? The honey badger looked up at the boy, then back at Keth'var. His small eyes showed no fear, no concern, no acknowledgement that he was about to face something that outweighed him by a factor of 10. Begin! ZXTH commanded from her hovering platform. Keth'var raised his weapons, energy crackling between his claws. This would be over in seconds. The small mammal would be vaporized before it could even. Rascal moved. He didn't charge directly. That would have been suicidal even for a honey badger. Instead, he went low and fast, zigzagging across the arena floor in a pattern that seemed to defy physics. Keth'var's energy blast scored the ground where Rascal had been milliseconds before. The honey badger reached his opponent and launched himself upward, but not at Keth'var's head or chest, at his weapon systems. His claws found the junction between organic limb and mechanical enhancement, and he began to tear. Keth'var screamed and tried to shake him off, but Rascal had locked onto his target with the determination that had made honey badgers legendary on Earth. Sparks flew as one weapon system went offline, then another. Impossible, ZXTH breathed. No creature that size should be able to penetrate combat armor. Dr. Rodriguez, watching from the colony's defensive line, keyed his calm. Actually, honey badgers have proportionally stronger jaws than most large predators, and their claws can dig through concrete. Your champion's armor isn't designed for this type of close-quarters persistence attack. Keth'var managed to grab Rascal with one of his remaining free arms, lifting the honey badger away from his damaged weapons. For a moment, it looked like the battle might be over. Then Rascal did something that would be talked about in xenobiology circles for decades to come. He twisted in Keth'var's grip, somehow contorting his flexible spine to reach the Keth'var's primary sensory cluster, and bit down. The sound Keth'var made was unlike anything the watching aliens had ever heard. It was the sound of an apex predator suddenly realizing it was prey. Rascal dropped to the ground as Keth'var staggered backward, 2 of his primary eyes dark and leaking fluid. The honey badger immediately went for the legs, targeting the joint weaknesses he'd discovered during the river attack. Stop this, ZXTH commanded. Keth'var, use your combat protocols. But Keth'var was no longer thinking tactically. Pain and panic had overridden his training, and he was simply trying to get away from the small, furry instrument of destruction that seemed utterly determined to dismantle him piece by piece. Rascal was methodical, almost surgical in his attacks. He wasn't trying to kill, he was trying to disable, to neutralize the threat. Each strike targeted a weakness, each movement calculated to avoid retaliation while maximizing damage to his opponent's combat effectiveness. Within 10 minutes, Keth'var the Bonerender, terror of 50 worlds, was on the ground, his weapon systems destroyed, his armor breached in a dozen places, making the same sound Keth'var made when they surrendered. Rascal sat back on his haunches and began grooming himself, apparently considering the matter settled. The arena was absolutely silent except for Keth'var's labored breathing and the soft sound of Rascal's tongue against his fur. Well, Marcus said into his calm, I believe that settles our wager. High Commander ZXTH stared down at her defeated champion, then at the small creature that had just rewritten everything she thought she knew about combat effectiveness ratings. This is not over, she transmitted, but her voice lacked conviction. Actually, came a new voice over the comm. It is. The new voice belonged to Admiral Thane Corvanis of the Galactic Council Fleet, and his timing was perfect. 12 Council dreadnoughts materialized from hyperspace, surrounding the Keth'var fleet like wolves circling wounded prey. High Commander ZXTH, Admiral Corvanis transmitted. You are in violation of 17 different sections of the Galactic Protection Accords. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. ZXTH found herself trapped between the Council fleet and a planet apparently defended by the most unreasonable creature in the galaxy. Admiral, we were conducting a legitimate salvage operation. You were attempting to enslave children from an unprotected colony, Corvanis interrupted. The evidence has been transmitted to Council headquarters, including footage of your champion being systematically defeated by what I'm told is essentially a 30-pound ball of fur and attitude. On the surface, Marcus picked up Tommy and walked over to where Rascal was now investigating the defeated Vextar with scientific curiosity. The Keth'var warrior had curled into a defensive posture, making no aggressive moves toward his former opponent. Dad, Tommy whispered, I think Rascal broke him. I think Rascal broke more than just him, son. Dr. Rodriguez approached, tablet in hand, eyes bright with discovery. Marcus, you need to see this. I've been monitoring the Consortium's communications during the battle. They're not just afraid of Rascal, they're terrified of what he represents. Which is a species that doesn't follow the rules of engagement that the rest of the galaxy has accepted for millennia. Look at this. He showed Marcus the tablet displaying intercepted transmissions. They're calling for a complete revision of their tactical doctrine. Some of them are suggesting they abandon operations in this entire sector. Sarah Mitchell joined them, still carrying her rifle, but wearing the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her in weeks. Gets better. The Council's Xenobiology Department is requesting detailed behavioral studies on honey badgers. Apparently, there are 17 other species that have similar unreasonable aggression traits, and they want to catalog all of them. Commander Jackson's voice crackled over the comm from the command bunker. Marcus, you need to get up here. We're getting calls from colonies across the sector. Word of what happened here has spread, and everyone wants to know where they can get their own honey badger. Tommy giggled and knelt down to pet Rascal, who was still examining Vextar with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Hear that, boy? You're famous. The honey badger looked up at Tommy with those small, dark eyes, then back at Vextar. He seemed to be considering whether the large alien might be hiding any food, and finding him lacking in that regard, lost interest entirely. Admiral Corvanis's voice came over the comm again, this time addressing the colonists directly. Citizens of New Eden, by authority of the Galactic Council, I'm hereby extending formal protection status to your colony and any others that choose to adopt similar defensive strategies. Defensive strategies? Marcus asked. The Council's military analysts are calling it the Honey Badger Doctrine, the Admiral explained. The principle that sometimes the most effective deterrent isn't superior firepower or tactical brilliance. It's the absolute certainty that any aggressor will face opposition that simply doesn't understand the concept of surrender. Dr. Rodriguez was practically vibrating with excitement. They're going to study Earth's entire ecosystem, looking for other species with similar traits. This could revolutionize galactic defense theory. What about the consortium? Sarah asked. Oh, they're finished, Admiral Corvanis replied with satisfaction. Half their fleet commanders are already surrendering rather than risk encountering another honey badger scenario. The other half are requesting reassignment to sectors with more predictable opponents. As if summoned by the conversation, High Commander ZXTH's final transmission came through. New Eden Colony. This is the Keth'var Consortium. We are withdrawing from this system permanently. We will update our databases to classify your world as a Class X threat level and distribute warnings to all consortium operations. Tommy looked up at his father. What's a Class X threat level? Marcus grinned. It means they'd rather fight a battleship than mess with Rascal. The honey badger, completely oblivious to his new galactic reputation, had found something interesting in the wreckage of Vexstar's weapons and was methodically taking it apart to see how it worked. 3 months later, the Honey Badger protocols were formally adopted by the Galactic Council as a legitimate defense strategy for frontier colonies. Earth was granted provisional membership in the Council specifically to provide honey badger breeding pairs and training to worlds requesting them. Marcus stood in the same spot where he'd first worried about Tommy playing by the river, watching his son teach a group of young colonists how to properly care for their new honey badger companions. The animals had adapted to their role as protectors with typical honey badger aplomb, which is to say, they treated it as just another interesting thing to do between meals and naps. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked, joining him at the observation point. Marcus watched Rascal demonstrate his technique for dismantling alien technology to a fascinated group of Council xenobiologists who had been studying him for weeks. The honey badger had become surprisingly patient with scientists, provided they brought adequate snacks. About becoming famous throughout the galaxy for having an unreasonable pet? Marcus smiled. Nah. Besides, Rascal's not unreasonable. He's just thorough. As if he'd heard his name, Rascal looked up from the alien device he was methodically destroying and fixed Marcus with that steady, fearless gaze that had already become legendary across 17 star systems. Then he went back to his work because, after all, the galaxy wasn't going to defend itself.